All right. We're live for Fireside Chat number 186. Sorry, running a bit late here. Stuff going on this week. Number one, congratulations to Seacart Leitling on winning the WA recruitment drive, which is now over as of February 1st. Of course, month has rolled over, so that means roll call has ended, new roll call is out. That means new calendar is out. Officer meeting this Saturday, the 5th at 2:30 p.m. Pacific. So again, that is required. So if you are an officer and you cannot make it, please let me know. We've been talking about some stuff among the officers. I think the big thing is, and we're going to talk about this in the officer meeting, but we've been considering the trying to organize ourselves better around games. So most of you would be familiar with the fact that historically we used platoons as our sort of divisions or bases on individual games. So each platoon would work on a certain game. We might have multiple platoons on a big game that we play a lot, and those platoons would have officers in charge of them, would have to write reports, create roll calls for the platoons. They would be tasked with ensuring that the platoons are successful, etc. More recently, we had war bands doing a similar kind of thing. I think we had a mixed bag with those overall, but I think our thinking right now is that we can do something where we don't necessarily confine people to platoons, but we do designate people who are in charge of WA's efforts on certain games, and those people do have to write reports on those games, mostly with the aim of keeping track of who is active on that game, any new recruits, recommending promotions or demotions and stuff, and therefore kind of we'll just maintaining our presence on that game. And it would be pretty simple to do that, just sort of evolving it out of our current list of games in the games channel and just growing those into sort of more organized efforts. And I think bending our chain of command, our list of ranks, to that might be a good idea as well. So that's kind of the change or set of changes that we've been talking about recently that I think could be good for trying to kind of inject more meaning into the ranks. Because right now our ranks just don't have a lot of meaning beyond just going up means that you are higher, basically. It does mean more responsibility, but at the same time, the difference between a warrant officer and an admiral at this point is kind of negligible in practice. So I don't think that that is good. So I think that if we do build it such that we have platoons, for example, by default, the lieutenant is in charge of a platoon. The ensign and warrant officers, other officer staff. Um, just spitballing, maybe you have to be at least a Master Chief Petty Officer in order to run a platoon. But, and I'm using the word platoon, that's just a placeholder. We might not use the word platoon in order to avoid confusion with the previous uses of the word. But say you had to be MCPO or higher in order to run a platoon. And then if you did as much, you would have to apply to start one. Then you would have the same responsibilities, for example, as a lieutenant. So you'd have to write those reports, basically, is what we'd be doing. Probably a monthly situation report, as we used to do. And doing as much as well. Um, Lost my train of thought on that one. Well, the idea would be that, oh, yeah, so things would start off with, okay, you find some game, we get you a game channel. You start getting activity on there, maybe you get in some recruits or some guests that play the game, maybe you start hosting an event for it, maybe it's even required to host an event for a game in order to make it into a platoon, um, and so on. And then once you get things going, you apply to make it a full-fledged platoon, you get you get to name it, for example. You start to build up an officer staff. You start to get promoted with your success with building up the presence on that game, etc. So then you've got above lieutenants, you've got commanders and captains overseeing multiple lieutenants. You've got the admiral and the fleet admiral overseeing everything. So it kind of builds a lot more that structure, makes it much clearer, which I think would be good. It makes our efforts on organizing games better because we can keep track of who's active. So instead of having to worry about event attendance, we can also just see, well, who is active in game, and that should count. Basically, if you're not attending an event but you are playing with WM members on the game, that works. But and that's something we talked about previously, but we don't have a way to keep track of that presently. But if we make sure that we have people in charge of individual games and they have to write a report, which includes who is active, rather than having a roster, you would just say who played the game that month, basically. And that would then let us see who is being active, so we can know who should be promoted, who should be demoted, etc. And then you don't have to worry about attending an event for people who are weird time zones, weird schedules, etc., who can't make the events. No problem, as long as we see that you're gaming, you're good. So a lot of benefits, I think. Potential problems. I mean, the issue is how permanent can we make these platoons? I mean, do they have full-time staff? Because the problem that we frequently encountered before is that people play multiple different games, so we kind of want to give people that freedom. So the thought is that we kind of work it the way it works right now, where take a Silva, for example. A Silva hosts two different events, Destiny and League of Legends. So, it wouldn't make sense to, say, force members like a Silva to be in, say, the League of Legends platoon, right? I mean, maybe, but then what if things change? What if somebody stops playing one game, they only play another, and they have to transfer? It creates a lot of chaos if people are just playing tons of different games. So if instead we kind of work it where it's sort of you just have a job, which is to write that report and play the game and kind of run things on that game. I mean, you can have it's like a part-time job. You can have it. You can also do other stuff. You're not stuck in that platoon, but you are in charge of it basically. So we could say that officers have to be in charge of a certain platoon. There's a lot of cogs that we can replace and change around, but this is the working idea we've discussed, and hopefully we can start to get things hammered down more via all thing discussions and the officer meeting this Saturday again. That said, I think that's about it. So I'll be hanging out in office hours. Unfortunately, pretty short this time, but I will be available for a little bit.